All right, guys, we're on part 9. Finally getting to the end of this. We've got our recurve shaped for the most part, and basically number 9, this video is going to be all about the finishing. So it's going to be finished up, the little details we got to finish along the way, and the actual finish we put on the bow and how we go about doing it, how we go about sanding this down, the different grits I'm going to be using to get this fine-tuned and everything like that. So hit that like and subscribe and stay tuned, and we're going to finish this bow off. Okay, here's some of the things that we're going to take care of. One thing that Mad Max on Trad Gang pointed out to me was the deepest part of my handle needs to correspond with the highest part of this crown here on your arrow shelf. So I need to fix my shelf a little bit to make sure this deepest part is the highest point. Second thing I need to do is I've got a little bit of ridge right in here, and it's just a hard area to work, so I'm going to clean that up. Then I also checked the weight of this bow. I went ahead and strung it up, put it on a scale, and right now it's hitting right at 48 pounds at 28 inches. And when I ordered a kit to be 45 pounds at 28 inches. And I know what we can do is we can sand both sides of the fiberglass limbs, okay, to bring the weight down. And when I talked with Bingham, or Elmont, I called Bingham's and spoke with Elmont there, and he told me that actually 48 pounds is right where I need to be before any sanding is done on this, and that I shouldn't need to sand the limbs per se, because just enough sanding on these edges of the limb to take the sharp edge off. It's kind of like a really sharp edge here, and it's really good to wear gloves too, because I've got so much fiberglass in me working on this thing. But to take this edge off, and when I take the edges off of these limbs, he said that's probably going to bring me down to the 45-pound mark. So again, we're going to round these edges all over the place. We're going to clean this up in here. And I still think I'm going to work on the shape a little more. I think I finished the shaping, but you saw the process and what it takes. And I think I'm going to work a little bit more on thinning some things out a little bit, putting a little, maybe making this whole handle section a little smaller in here, and just maybe doing a little more rounding with it, just to fine tune it. And then at that point, we're going to start using different grits of sandpaper and basically starting to sand this thing, starting with probably like 80 and then working up to 120 and then 220 and on up. And just to get that real good sanded finish. Once that's done, we'll actually start applying the finish on it. So I can't find my little sanding block, so I'm going to improvise with a 2x4 piece of 150. And what I'm going to attempt to do is basically run this down in limbs and just start trying to edge over the limbs here. And that's basically how I'm going to do it. Wow, what a difference that little bit of sanding did to these edges. Because it was so sharp and those fiberglass shards would just get me all the time, because I should have been wearing gloves and I wasn't, but wow, what a difference that made. Yeah, so basically I put some 150 on these limbs. They're definitely much less sharper. I'm not getting the fiberglass in me. But I think I'd like a little bit more rounded, so let me get a little more aggressive. I'm going to go down to an 80, some sandpaper from the belt sander, but I'm going to do it by hand, and just try to round these edges a little bit more with this right here, and then come back to the 150 and just see if I can get them a little more rounded, a little quicker on my limbs, and that'll probably be good for that. Okay, one of the things I got to deal with right here, you don't see this right here, but I got a little nub that runs all the way down to the other side there. And I need to get that cleaned up. Of course, it's on the curvature of the shelf that I've got. So what I'm gonna do is I got this little Harbor Freight thing I bought, and I'm just gonna try to use that to see if I can just work that off of there real easy. Just be gentle with it and try to work that piece out. All right, at this point, we can go ahead and take these stickers off, because I know which one the bottom and top of them are based on the cut right here that matches the riser fade right here. So we know what that is, and it's obvious now which one's the bottom based on our handle setup. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull these stickers off. I've already rounded the edges on here. I've sanded these. I did some 80 and then I did some 150. All right, as part of the finishing process, you need to sand the glass to some degree. when you look through the Bingham's instructions, they want you to use, I think, wet or dry 120 or 150 to sand these down. Now, the guys on Trad Gang said, yeah, you got to sand them a little bit so the finish will adhere to it, but you only need to do about 220 is enough to get the finish to stick. But the issue that I found out after talking to Elmont, as far as the weight goes, I was coming in at 48 pounds. This was a set for 45 pounds. I was coming in at 48 when I tested it, and basically what he told me was that I'm at 48, I'm where I should be because I'm still going to sand this at 150. So his intentions is for me to not only round the corners, but sand both sides of your limb with 150. And once you do that, that's going to bring this down the extra 3 pounds to get you to the 45 pounds is what he's thinking. So he felt like I was right on target with the weight. So I'm going to go ahead and do the 150 to take more off than I would if I did on 220 to basically try to bring this down to mark. And I got some of these, whatever you call these kind of things, they're kind of like a foam sanding pad, a 120. And so I'm going to start with here and then, work my way up because you do want to, get to a higher level with this. Once you do 120, you're definitely going to want to come back and get it smoother with the, finer sanding than that. But all right, so just thought using this kind of a sanding block, it's a little flexible, might make it easier to work these curves. And so basically, just going to go ahead and work this. This is 120. And we're going to work on getting this sanded down evenly. On both sides of the limb here. I just can't imagine that that's been sanded enough to drop it down 3 pounds though. Since the last video, I did do some more shaping work. Basically, I just want to get the handle a little bit smaller. I felt like it was still too bulky. Feel like I need to round this off a little bit more. I went ahead and hit the limbs with the 120. And again, the guys at Trad Gang say you really only need to go to, I think, 220, 240 or whatever, for the finish to take hold. But in Bingham's plans, they want you to do that 120 or 150 just to get the weight down to target weight. So when I was about 3 pounds higher, so went ahead and did that. We'll still hit it with the 220. I did pretty much all the shaping on a 1-inch vertical belt sander to get this area right in here. I used my rigid spindle sander, both the belt and the different size spindles to get these curves worked out and everything. But pretty much everything I did was 40 grit for the main shaping. Then I went to 80 grit for some of this stuff, and then I 40 and 80 grit all on the spindle sander. Haven't done anything by hand at this point. So at this point, as part of the finishing, I think I've got the shape that I want now. I've kind of checked everything, make sure my coloration here is good, matches. My coloration in here matches, kind of thing. And so at this point, I'm just going to start the finish sanding now. So I'm just going to start with hit everything. I've already used the 80 on it, so I'm going to go to 120 by hand. I'm going to do everything by 120 and then work my way up until I get a real smooth finish on here. There's a couple places I couldn't get with the spindle sander, like right in here. I couldn't round this piece right here, obviously, because the spindle sander will be hitting this. So some things I'll have to do by hand, but it'll drop down a little bit to probably the 80 to get that down to the curve, and then I'll go to the 120. But right now, I'm just going to hit this all with 120, and I'm going to use these kind of sanding blocks that I've got because I get around the turns well, and then just basically sandpaper in my hand. So that's basically what I'm going to do. Here's the 120 block. I'm just going to start hitting this for this. Yeah, so basically as I'm sanding this, you kind of just run your fingers over it. And you can kind of tell where it's really smooth and where you still have some rough spots as you're going through it. Right here it's still a little rough. And just simply come back and hit that section. And you should start to see the difference, feel the difference with it when you do that. There we go, better. You can just kind of feel it through. So once I get everything smooth with the 120, I'm going to move up to the next level of sandpaper. And here's a little rough spot here. Like I said, you can feel that. I finished with the 120. Feels pretty good. I'm not going to jump straight to 220. I'm going to go ahead and go to, I got some 180 of this. So I'm just going to use this to get the 180 done. I'll probably go ahead and hit the limbs of 180 since I did 150, just to step my way up. I just think it's easier if you take those little increments to get it up there than going straight from 120 to 220. So that's basically what I'm gonna do here. Just start working at it with this. I'm gonna improvise here. So I have a good way to grip this. Just gonna put this on the 220 block. So this is 180 on the 220 block. And just that way I got to work something to hold my hand better. That's the idea here. Yeah, it doesn't get as hot on your hands this way either. And you can still work it in the curves and everything else. So yeah, this is working good this way. All right, hit this thing pretty good with the, what do I have here? The 180. So now I'm gonna step it up to a 280 pad, or 220 pad rather, and work the whole thing with this 220 pad at this point. And just take it to the next level. That's the plan. Okay, worked it all with 220. Now I'm stepping up to 320. I got another little pad here for that, so I'm gonna wrap it in the 220, around 220 block, like so, and gonna go ahead and hit it with 320 now. And try to stick with going with the grain as best you can with that, because if you go cross grain, you'll have to work backwards, get your scratches out. Okay, at this point, I went all the way through 320 with the sandpaper, and I got everything really smooth and everything. I straightened the bow back up, and now I've got a tillering issue here. My gap from the top limb to the bottom limb, there's a 5/16 difference on that now. And I don't know if you can tell from the camera view, but I can definitely tell when I'm looking at it. So what I'm gonna do is unstring it, and I'm gonna basically sand this limb on both sides, front and back, a little bit more, because this is the stronger limb, obviously. I want to get that gap to be no more than 1/4 inch, is my understanding. So I'm gonna unstring it, sand this limb a little bit more. All right, going back to the 120, work it a little bit more. Now, since I hit it with the 120, I'm gonna go ahead and hit it with the 120, or the 220 also, just to take out the 120 scratch marks in here. All right, I just measured again, top and bottom limbs, the distance there, and basically that little bit of sanding I did not make a difference. So apparently I've got to do a lot of sanding on this bottom limb to take some of that fiberglass down a little bit to loosen that limb up a little bit more. Working on this a little more. The lower limb is definitely my stiffer limb right over here, and the distance here, this distance from this distance was about 1/2 inch off. Needs to be 1/4 inch or less. And I took the limb off and basically sanded both sides of the limb. I did it a number of times, put the limb back on, measured it, sanded it, measured it. Wasn't really doing much. I called up Elmon at Bingham to talk to him, and he said, well, he said it might be in the rounding of the edges, that maybe this limb's rounded a little more than this one. He said, if this isn't getting it by going with a flat, go with the rounding of the edges. And sure enough, I did 2 or 3 sessions of just sanding around these edges a little bit more, and brought this into 1/4 inch now. So I feel good about that now. So since I was all the way down to 120, 150 with these, I'm gonna go ahead and do a little bit final sanding, get these up to 220 on the limbs to get the, just the scratches out from the 120, 150. I'm gonna get up to the 220 level. I think I went up to 320 with this stuff. I'm gonna see if I got any 400. If I do, I'm gonna hit everything a little bit with 400, and then I'm gonna set it up to start applying the finish. Here's a piece of 180. I'm just gonna give this a quick hit. Just had the 150 on it. I got a piece of 220. I'm gonna hit the limbs with 220 now to bring it back up to the 220 level. So I've got both limbs up to 220. I'm back to the riser. I'm hitting it with some 400 now. I think we're just about ready to do start spraying the finish on. So it's been a long time coming, so I'm excited about it, but this is getting really, really smooth. So it's just a matter of taking your time and keep working it. Like I said, I did a little bit more shaping on this than in the shaping video. I just wanted to do a little bit narrow on the handle here and bring some of the curves back in and things like that. But now Finally at the 400 level of sandpaper. And I'm feeling good about it. So once I get all this stuff squared up here and finish sanding everywhere with this 400, I think I'm gonna get it, the tack cloth, clean all this dust off, and set up a little area I can spray. All right, just went back through the instructions one more time, and they actually said take the entire bow all the way to 400. And so although I've done that with my riser, I've got them to 400. The limbs I stopped at 220, so I'm gonna go ahead and do a 320 and 400 on these guys. All right, so got everything sanded down, went to 400, hit the riser real good, got the limbs to 320. They're kind of milky looking. I talked to Elmont, he said that's normal. When we hit it with clear coat, it's gonna fix all that stuff. Same with the riser. About ready to do this now. I looked at a couple different things, went around Trad Gang, asked some advice, and several guys helped with different things, but when it came down to it, I'm gonna go with Kenny M's solution. It looked like it was kind of cheaper for me since I don't do this all the time and I don't have a spray gun and all that kind of stuff. And it dries pretty quick and I don't have to like, some of this content, you know, you use it, certain sprays, 48 hours, you can't use it anymore. So basically available to O'Reilly's, this is the Duplicolor Perfect Match Clear Coat is what I've got here. And basically I'm gonna put several coats on here, just light coats. And basically what Kenny M said is he puts about 4 coats on the riser, on the wood, 2 coats on the lemon glass, and I think he does, I'm gonna have to go back and check it out before I do it, but I'm gonna start putting some coats of this on. And then once I'm done with building it up with this clear coat, then we're gonna finish up with this wheel clear coat and matte. So it's not so shiny, it's just a matte finish. But this will be the top coat, of which I think I'll have 2 top coats. And in between coats, I'm probably gonna hit it with like 800 grit. I did see some guys talk on Trad Gang about if you use steel wool, you might run into this situation where the steel wool starts to break apart and the pieces of steel get into the riser, into the wood, embed themselves, and then they rust. And you got these rust marks on your belt, so I don't want that. So anyway, we're gonna hit it with this. I hit this with a tack cloth first, so everything should be good and clean. So we're gonna try this and see how it goes. Oh, got some runs there going down. Never done this before, so I'm just trying to do light coats and probably need to get it faster and harder. Okay, the product says it takes 10 minutes to dry and apply the next coat. I'm obviously going to do some sanding. I got some runs. I haven't done this before, so I'm just trying to get it down, you know. So I put some of it on too thick and I saw runs on the limbs here. So I definitely sand between coats, but wow, it just made it pop, just 1 coat of spray. So I'm pretty excited about it. So we're gonna hit this about 4 times on here, on the riser for sure. And then on these limbs, you're obviously gonna have to sand down the runs and then hit them again. So we're just gonna keep working through the process, at least get 4 coats on that anyway. And then we'll go from there. It's pretty cool. So now this is dry. I'm just gonna check it over. I'm gonna hit it with some sandpaper. I don't think I got any runs on this. This is pretty good. But the glass was a lot slicker, and so there are some runs. So I'm going to try to sand those down real quick before I hit this again. But yeah, when I talked to Elmont, it's kind of like you start sanding these limbs and they all get white and cloudy, the glass does, and you think, oh, I've ruined the limbs. But you hit it with a clear coat and everything just pops back. I was very concerned about my phenolic too. It seemed like there was a lot of white in my phenolic when I did it. And now that it's sprayed, the black just really popped out of it. So this is a good start, I think, on these runs, and I'm gonna try to go lighter on my coat next time to try to prevent the runs from happening. Okay, I actually sanded out with a 400 to get the runs I had out, and that worked out pretty good using the 400 to get that out. And then I got my second coat, a clear coat on. Just let that dry, come back and hit it again. Okay, checking the second coats out. I got no runs this time, so my technique got a little better. So I'm gonna pull these down, and I think I'm gonna hit this with 800 now. and then hit it again. Okay, I decided it was easier to only do one limb at a time. So this one, I put another coat on, but not the other one. And I did 600 sandpaper in between this coat. And it's still a little tacky because now I'm getting more coats on. It's taking a little longer to dry. Just gonna let this dry a little bit more and then sand it with probably 1,000 at this point, and then hit it again. Okay, this is 3 coats of the clear coat. And the riser's really starting to come alive, become really vibrant. So I'm gonna hit this with I think some 800 grit now and hit it again. And I found it's easier just to do one limb at a time because they're kind of getting in my way. And I keep getting some drips occasionally, so I got to keep working those. So probably have to work those limbs a little bit. I'm just not real good at spraying it without getting the drips. So anyway, that's what she's looking like right now. All right, so I got a number of good coats on here now. I'm gonna hit it with 1,000 grit sandpaper, do it one more time with this clear coat. And then I think I should be getting pretty close to time to put the final coat on it. Okay, that's 4 coats. It's pretty good. I think I'm gonna go ahead and do one more of this first. I'm gonna hit it with 1,500 and then do one more coat before I start with the top coat. All right, I've had a heck of a time trying to spray these limbs without getting runs in them. And so as I keep trying to do coats, I'll get a run here or there and I sand it out and I come back and hit it again and I gotta run a different place. And I think, A, I'm really not experienced in spraying like this, but B, because they were hanging vertically, I think the stuff, instead of just kind of just gelling and flattening out on its own, gravity was pulling that stuff down, and I think that's causing a run. So I'm gonna try to do it with a limb set up horizontally and just do one side at a time and see if I can get a better coverage here. And I'll just do a couple layers like this. And then I'm gonna go ahead and hit this guy one more time. I went ahead and hit him with 1,500, and I'm gonna hit him one more time with a clear coat. So this will be coat number 5 for that, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, I will say this method worked out much better. So I'm gonna have to raise this up to spray the other side of them. But I got all the edges around and the top surface here. No streaks, so happy about that. So I'm gonna let that dry, and then I'm gonna have to raise something up to put those blocks up higher and then flip the limbs over and do it that way. But this worked very good for not getting the runs. So anyway, that's the best I could come up with. All right, I got 5 coats, I think, on at this point, maybe 6. Can't remember, I just kept hitting it a couple times, sand it down, hit it. So now I'm gonna start doing the top coat. I'm also just finishing up with the limbs. Finally got most of the runs I had worked out in the limbs, so just hit another coat of those with the duplicate. So I'm gonna go ahead and hit this now with this product right here, the Duplicolor Wheel Matte Clear Coat. I'm gonna put a coat or 2 on this and again hit it with the 1,500 sandpaper in between, I guess. And this will be the top coat that's gonna go on here. So we're just about done, folks. All right, so a couple things. I was ready to put the final coat on these limbs. I finally had all the stuff where, I've got all the runs out and all that stuff, and this spray method was working much better. Feel like I had a good coat on there. I go to put the final coat on. I'm just finishing spraying, and all of a sudden I catch an eyelash that landed right here. So I go to touch it with my finger, and I knock the whole thing off. It falls down here. I pick it back up. Now I got a bug on it too, and it's just The other thing I learned with the final coating, this block idea is no good. But actually this matte, this wheel coating, seems to go on a little bit easier than the first one. So I'm actually going to have to sand this down, but I'm going to hang these back up to finish these with the final coats after I get off. Because what happened is when I flipped them over, it put little lines in here where it was still wearing into the final coat. So I have some line marks in places. So I'm going to sand that back down and then hang them and then do the final coats with that. On a side note, I think we're done with this. I've got 3 coats of that last matte finish on here, and I feel like it's pretty good. So I just gotta get these limbs done, and we're about done, baby. Okay, so I'm thinking I'm getting the final coats on the limbs. We're getting the Duplicolor Wheel Matte Clear Coat. So I've got them hanging now again. I don't have the runs with this stuff, so it's just the Duplicolor, the other stuff. I'm gonna do the Perfect Match Clear Coat. That's what kind of ran more. So the other method was definitely better for using that. And like I said, I'm done with the riser, so I'm just gonna let this stuff dry and let it set up. And I think the full, you can, paint this after it dries for 10 minutes for your second and third coats if you want, but I think it wants you to set it up for like 5 or 6 hours. I'll have to go back and look at this. Yeah, so I think we're just about done here. All right, guys, it's done. It is totally done, and I'm so excited because this thing, I think, turned out really good. Never done one of these before. Turned out really just amazing. Smooth finish. That finishing process that Kenny M told me about worked great. Couldn't be happier about it. Limbs turned out great. Ended up coming in at 47 pounds, and I was shooting for 45, but hey, I'm okay with that. But that just tells you all that sanding I did on the edges and on the limbs and everything only brought it down 1 pound. Got the cat whiskers on, got the string knock on, got the air arrest on, and man, I'm telling you, I just think it looks great. I couldn't be happier with it. I'm just super pumped about it. So, been taking a couple shots with it just to get used to it. And I will tell you that this is gonna wrap it up, but I'm gonna do one more video after this one. This is obviously, the bow is done, it's complete. I'm gonna do one more video. It should be just a short video, and I'm just gonna go back over all the things that I think were important that I learned along the way that would be a help to anybody that's wanting to do this project for the first time. So you got all the videos. I'm gonna talk about the mistakes I made, things I should have done differently along the way. That'll be one more video, and that'll end the series on this takedown recurve build. Yeah, this is just super cool, and I'm excited about it. So if you don't mind, hit that like and subscribe. It helps me out, and we'll see you next time.